All right, Kim, we're going to talk about propagation. So here's the first question. What is propagation and why do we need to propagate?
Well, propagation, if you're like most gardeners, once you get the gardening fever, you just want to acquire more and more plants. When you learn to propagate, it's a skill set that you learn, plus it's a way to get new plants.
Okay.
It's economical.
Okay, all right, so you want to get us started on some of your practices?
Sure, there are several ways to propagate.
Okay.
The easiest to me, one of the easiest, is to seed. It's very economical. It's a quick fix. You get plants fairly quickly. A lot of people are interested in vegetable gardening now, and it's very easy to seed your vegetables. There are basically two types of seeding: direct seeding or in situ, which means you take your seeds, you go out in the yard, and you plant them in your prepared bed. Mm-hmm. A lot of your vegetables you can do that way, especially if the plant is going to have a taproot. Those don't usually transplant real well, so you want to start those outside. The other is indirect seeding, and usually what that involves is seeding into a container of some sort, and then you usually end up transplanting at least once or twice before you actually move it into the spot where you are going to grow it on. We do a lot of indirect seeding at the Dixon.
Okay.
And so basically what I do with the indirect seeding is, this is our seeding tray. And I've got little cells. We put a special mix in there. It's basically just a soil mix. It's a little looser. And we put one seed per cell.
Okay.
And that's just because it's easier to transplant, so you don't have to divide them.
Okay. Makes sense.
We do quite a few. And usually the seeds we're using, the germination rate is really high. So we know if we need 40 plants and I seed 42 seeds, I'm going to get at least 40 plants.
Okay.
A lot of that depends on your germination rate.
Now let me ask you this before you keep going. So can the homeowner get these seed trays?
Oh yes, you can. A lot of times you'll see them in the big box stores, and they come in a big flat. This has actually been cut in half.
Okay.
And then it'll have a dome on the top. Sometimes they'll already have the soil in them, and it'll have a little tray that holds water on the bottom. Okay. That's what this tray is for. We actually seed into dry mix, and then pour warm water onto the tray and let it soak up from the bottom. You don't want to water on top of this because your seed's going to wash out. So
that's good to know.
That's good to know. Yes.
Okay.
Once they get this, these are some seedlings. It's Aqualesia or Columbine that we seeded, and these were actually seeded on January 23rd. Okay. But we call these plugs, and what we do once they get their second set of true leaves. Okay. What we do is we just kind of squeeze it like this, and then I usually take a bamboo stick and you just poke up the bottom, and it just pops out, and there's your plug. Sorry, I'm making a mess.
Oh, that's all right.
And then you just move that to the next size pot and you grow them on. That's actually the pink flowers down there. Those actually, the seed is about the size of a grain of pepper. It's very tiny. Man. And then in 12 to 14 weeks, that's what I have. Okay. So, and that's another important thing with seeding. You need to decide when you want your plant, and then count back the number of weeks that it tells you on the package that it takes for the plant to get that size. Okay. So with the Snapdragon there, we actually seed those. We want them about the 1st of February, so I count back 12 to 14 weeks, and that's usually the end of October, 1st of November. Mm-hmm. That's when I seed it. Okay. Usually a month later, I can up-pot it to the first small pot, and then we move them into the big gallons. And then it's very important for us for timing, because I want the flowers for the arrangements in the museum, so I have to have them on a certain schedule.
It's pretty neat. Now, can we get to the cuttings?
Yes.
Okay.
On the cuttings, there's several ways to vegetatively propagate something, which basically with that, you're going to get the identical plant that you're working with. Okay. And there's several ways to do this. You can do stem cuttings with herbaceous plants, and that's real good for your annuals. If my mom always kept coleus in the windowsill. She would save them from the season before, and you just take a cutting And what I do is we call this the mother plant.
Okay.
And we keep several of these, and then we take cuttings off of it. But you just find a stem, and you want it not real flexible. That means it's the newer growth, but you want to get it back just a little bit to where it's not real stiff.
Okay.
And what I usually do, you can take it off here, and you'll usually hear as much as feel a little snap. And you can do it that way.
Okay.
It's really best to cut because you end up tearing. But the next, it's really very easy to do this. You can either root it by dipping it in hormone and then sticking it in soil, or with these, I like to start them in water. It's just easier, it's quicker, but you just take your leaves and strip them off.
Okay.
And then you want several leaf nodes, 1, 2, 3, down into the water or into the soil.
Okay.
So that's what, and then this is what you get in about 2 weeks.
Wow, how about
And then
that?
you just stick that 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's just in water.
That's just in water. We usually set it in a windowsill where it gets indirect light, good light, but indirect light. And then we just pot those into a soil mix.
Okay.
The other, that's a kind of an herbaceous. There's also semi-hardwood and hardwood cuttings. The boxwood, we don't do a lot of those. We do it more for demonstration and just what we call playing. But you usually use the past year's growth. And what you do is you find a stem that's the same thing, not real hard, or not, it's somewhat woody, but you know, it's not like this major stem here. But what you do is you just stick it, cut it off,
Okay.
use good clean clippers. I like to clean them in between with alcohol.
Okay. And we want to make sure we get a clean cut as well.
A clean
right?
cut,
Okay.
right. And then you do the same thing. You want to take your leaves off, and you want several nodes. And then what I like to do with hardwood, with semi-hardwood cuttings, and a lot of these depend on the time of the year. Usually May, June, July, you've had that first flush of new growth, and it's starting to get a little bit hard. It's not quite so tender. And then I just take a rooting hormone. There's also liquids you can use. You can buy them anywhere. This is kind of
so the homeowner can
professional
readily
strength.
get that?
There's one called Root Tone that you
Okay.
can find at
I'm
most
familiar
any
with that.
garden center. So what you do, I don't like to dip into that because if this is diseased, you're going to contaminate your whole container.
sense.
So what I do is pour it into a little cup, and you can, it's not necessary to wet this because it's going to stick. It's just a real fine powder, and I put it in there and knock the excess off. And then what I've done, I've got potting mix in there, and then I generally put a small layer of sand, and then I put more potting mix, and then you can just poke it in there.
Okay. Now, what is the sand for?
The roots seem to grow off that, into that fairly easily. Plus, it kind of holds a little moisture.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then, this is kind of short, but he's in
It's
there.
peeking out there.
He's peeking
We
in
can
there.
out see it. Yeah, that's looking
Generally, what I will do is water it once really well after that. And then we have a mist house, which keeps the humidity up, but most homeowners don't have their own mist house. So you can put it in a Ziploc bag and seal it and put it in good indirect light. And then that'll kind of keep it moist. And usually they root in maybe 2 to 3 months.
Well, Kim, we appreciate that. That was a demonstration. I'm pretty sure the homeowners are going to love that as well. So thank you much.
You're welcome.